Hey, this is Aaron,
And this is Kristen.
and this is the Drive Mode Show.
Yay, we're back and we've got a special guest today. Benjamin Hunting, one of our favorite automotive is on the phone from the Great White North of Canada.
Hey everybody.
How's it
Hey,
going?
It's a little cold, but other than that, things are good.
I mean, how's it going, eh?
Exactly. You gotta use the language that I'll understand.
When I first met Benjamin, I explained to him that I have seen all of the Mackenzie Brothers stuff and most of the episodes of Red Green and so on. So I'm fully versed in Canadian.
That's I think on the citizenship test. If you wanna immigrate.
and I met Ben last year Drive at the track and we had so much fun. And I know we stopped and got pie somewhere.
Yeah, we made sure to check out some of the smaller town aspects of northern Quebec and the delicious food that inhabits there.
Yes.
So, Benjamin, you're writing at Hemmings, and is that
Uh,
right?
not Hemmings, but Haggerty, which is
Haggerty, that's what I was
kind of
thinking
the
of. Yeah,
same. You can find my stuff there, Inside Hook, Motor Trend, and Driving Line.
awesome. And today we're actually going to talk about something you did for Inside Hook, I believe, right?
Yeah,
With car safety systems.
yeah. Kind of the idea is we're being increasingly bombarded by signals and beeps, flashes of light, little icons, head-up displays in modern cars. And it's all been done in the name of safety. And we're being told that this technology makes us safer drivers and helps reduce fatalities. But there's really not a lot of data to back up any of those assertions. And in fact, some of the data that's out there kind of says the opposite.
So, sort of like in today's age of COVID, stacking masks may or may not actually help, right?
Well, I think it boils down to the fact that humans have a finite attention span, and
Mhm.
driving already takes up a significant portion of that. So when you start throwing additional things into the mix that you need to pay attention to, it's going to be hard to find the resources to treat everything with the importance it requires. And I think the brain starts to ignore things that it doesn't perceive as being important. And when you have safety systems that are continually giving you an alert, and if those alerts are, let's say, only useful half the time, I think the discounting process of the brain starts to go into overdrive. It starts to say, well, I heard this beep 5 times today and I only needed it once, so maybe I don't need it at all.
That's
Sort of
interesting.
like the engine light phenomenon.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this in terms of teen drivers. I think about that a lot. My son's only 11, but I'm very interested in safety of teen drivers, and I think about they're kind of like training wheels, some of these safety features. And it will help keep them safe on the road because teenagers especially, they're still trying to figure out how to drive on the road, how to be a defensive driver, and all those help kind of keep them in line, kind of like the bowling alley that you put up the cards and they all down. But then if they don't have those and they rely on them, how do they learn how to do it without them?
That's a really great point. And even as adults, what you just said, it starts to resonate in other aspects of driving. The AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety did a study last year, actually, 2019, and they discovered that people who used these services the most, like lane keeping, blind spot assistance, all of that likely to be distracted while driving. And they even went farther to discover that it's not because people weren't familiar with the systems. It's actually the more familiar you are with them, the more likely you are to be distracted. And digging down into that data, what they found is it's very similar to what you just said about teen drivers. If you create an environment that's quote unquote semi autonomous, I mean, a term that I don't like very much, but which gets used a lot when describing these technologies, uh, people feel like they have that safety net all the time. And as a result, they don't only pay less attention to the safety net itself, but they pay less attention to driving. They feel like they've been freed from the responsibility of what's happening directly in front of them. They feel like if anything really bad happens, the car will catch it in time and they'll be able to react. And so they end up not paying attention.
Well, yeah.
Like the Tesla driver sleeping on the highway.
That's the extreme example.
Yeah. And we've seen the technology fail, so if the technology fails and you're not paying attention, then you're going to miss it. You're going to end up in accidents. I see people using their phones on the road all the time. Distracted driving is definitely a problem. And so, like you said, Benjamin, if people feel like they've got the safety net, they're not so worried about it, right?
Very, very much so. An analogy I've used in the past is if you're carrying an umbrella, you're less likely to be worried if it's going to rain. Whereas if you're out there without an umbrella, you're going to be looking at the skies. And when you're driving, the fact is, not only do we have these safety systems distracting us and vying for our attention, but as you mentioned, our smartphones are doing the same thing. And we get that instant engagement and that rush of interest when we get a notification on the phone. So of course that peels us away from the task at hand. And we're going to be more likely to kind of push driving into the background if we feel like the car is handling a lot of that for us. And I think that there's a real danger in how the messaging has evolved around safety systems, and using the word autonomous in any kind of context it's really inaccurate. And we're telling people who walk into a new car dealership, hey, this car has semi-autonomous technology. It will handle X percentage of the amount of driving for you. It'll accelerate and decelerate for you. It'll even maybe change lanes for you if you buy Super Cruise, or it'll follow the map for you. It'll do all these things for you. And the reality is it's not an autonomous system. It can't react in the same way as a human being, but it's being marketed in such a way that that's not clear at all. And I would be surprised if most people who are buying a new car are even shown how to use these systems, or if the salespeople, and not to take away from people selling cars, it's a tough job, it's a thankless job, but there's really not any kind of training going on in that area for them to show people how to use most of the features in the car, let alone the safety systems.
Going to the dealerships, like you said, in my experience, you have knowledgeable salespeople most of the time, but they're knowledgeable in a broad range of products, and they may or may not know the specifics for even just one brand, because they could be at a combined dealership, they could be, and the things are changing so quickly that just like looking at, say, Chrysler right now, I have a minivan. Going out into my driveway and sitting in that minivan, if you looked at the infotainment system on the current one versus what was in it just last year, it's a completely different system. It's the newest of the Uconnects, and there's a learning curve. And I don't know that a salesman can keep up with that year on year on year, because a salesperson is not going to be, like I said, they're more broad. And so when a consumer buys a car, most of the time, we just bought a car a couple of years ago, and the training period in that car was non-existent. We did a test drive, and the guy just showed us a bunch of stuff on the test drive. That's as far as the training went. There was no more information given.
And, there's one more thing I think that doesn't get talked about enough when we're discussing the idea of whether semi-autonomous technology makes cars safer. It's that there's more than just drivers on the road. And we have pedestrians, we have cyclists, we have animals, all sorts of, there's lots of obstacles and unpredictable stuff that's out there when we're driving. And if you look at traffic fatalities, we had a really strong decrease in people who were dying out on roads, highways, city streets, whatever, for decades. A lot of that had to do with the introduction of airbags, anti-drunk driving campaigns, better braking systems, and better engineering in the vehicles themselves to withstand an accident. But if you look at seatbelt laws as well, yeah, it's a combination of things. But it was all focused on people who are in vehicles. And if you start to look at data starting in 2015, numbers started to go back up. And this is right around the time advanced safety equipment started to become more common in vehicles. And it's possible to tie in the fact that while cars are safer and you're more likely to survive an accident now than you would have 20 years ago or maybe even 10 years ago, if you're a pedestrian and you get hit by a car, you're still going to die as easily today as you would have in the 70s or the 80s. And with people who are increasingly distracted behind the wheel and feeling like they can let go of the reins because of these safety systems, they're having accidents and they're not killing themselves, but they're killing pedestrians and they're killing cyclists.
So what's the answer then? What do you think, Benjamin, is a good mix then? Or what do we need to do to mitigate some of these concerns and challenges?
I wish I had all the answers. Some of the things that I think about a lot have to do with standardization. I think that there are numerous systems out there that it's very difficult to understand whether they're operating or if they are operating at what level. In particularly, Volvo has a system where for a long time, it was a semi-autonomous driving system on the highway. It would steer for you, it would accelerate, decelerate, but you had to be aware of a little icon that was on the dashboard that would change from yellow to green to white. And that should be in your face immediately. I think systems like Cadillac Super Cruise, which has a giant light on the steering wheel that you cannot possibly miss and that isn't ambiguous in its messaging in terms of the colors, I think that's something we need to move to across the board. I think there needs to be an industry standard where people immediately know whether a system is working and they immediately know whether it's even on or off. Aside from that, I think that marketing is creating a huge amount of problems for helping people understand how these systems work. Cars are so good these days across the board that technology is increasingly used to differentiate one brand from the other. And as a result, we see a lot of marketing that's focused on safety technologies and the details of those technologies. And we use so many different terms to describe what is essentially the same thing. And this is where we start seeing the overuse of words like autonomous, because it's a hype word. It's something that people want to be able to market. And because of that, we're not actually communicating what these features do. And I don't think there is a solution for that because there's no regulation of that type of marketing in the automotive industry, and I don't see how you would introduce that.
Yep, that's going to require people to make that change. And just like the way I wrote about flying cars recently, and flying cars are not flying cars. VTOLs, they're vertical lift vehicles type of thing. And they're not, people use the wrong terminology all the time. So do you think the disconnect is coming from the consumer or from the journalists or from the automakers themselves?
I think a lot of it is the automakers themselves and specifically marketing departments. And I understand why it's happening, but it doesn't help when you have outliers like the Tesla system we were talking about earlier, which you have a company that's been continually pushing the idea that it offers a fully autonomous driving system, what would be called level 5 autonomous driving by the Society of Automotive Engineers, when in fact it doesn't. And it's been in fact beta testing systems to try to get to that point using public roads. And there's been so much media focus on Tesla as a brand that how they talk about autonomous driving can in some ways dictate the flow of the conversation and dictate the response of other more mainstream brands. And it becomes a bad feedback loop. I'm not sure how you break that.
I remember talking about that point with another journalist. We were talking about Tesla specifically because we were talking about making the usual jokes about how the Model S just loves to smash into parked emergency vehicles and things like that. And it occurred to me, and the conversation changed when I talked about what if what Tesla's doing in terms of the constant use of marketing that makes their cars seem autonomous while the fine print is saying that they're not, and the use of terms like autopilot, and then the insistence by the Teslarati, that's what I call the hardcore Tesla fans, the insistence from them that they are fully autonomous cars and they're cutting edge and nobody's even close to that. This constant message that we're getting, I thought, what if that's actually being used as a distraction by other automakers who are now feeling more free to use terms like semi-autonomous and not get in trouble? Because really for Tesla, the the blowback has been very small comparatively, and at any time they can always just steer the conversation back over to Elon and company and say, well, we're not doing that. So with companies like Tesla specifically, I really don't like the fact that they use their customers as guinea pigs. That comes from a technology side, because Musk is ultimately a technology guy, and so he thinks in terms of, you put out a beta version and you let the consumers try it out. Well, the beta version of PayPal, which is a company he used to own, the beta version of PayPal has far less impact than does the beta version of a 6,000-pound vehicle at 80 miles an hour. It's a little bit different. And then looking towards other companies, Nissan has the ProPilot system. I'm a big fan of the ProPilot system, except for one thing, and that's something you pointed out before. You tend to stare at the instrument cluster, because that's the only place that will tell you if the ProPilot is engaged. So instead of watching the road, you're staring at to make sure you got those green lines. The blue stuff is activated and you got the green lines. Because once you don't have those, then the ProPilot's not working. And other than some faint beeps, there's really nothing else telling you that it's working. And so I agree with you that we should have some sort of standard, like a head-up displays are getting more and more common, so maybe that would be the answer, or the lights on the steering wheel or something like that.
And one final thing I think about a lot when it comes to these types of technologies is I'm not sure anyone's asking for them, and I'm not familiar with the actual appetite among new car buyers for this technology. I don't know how many people walk into a dealership and make a purchasing decision based on the availability of a semi-autonomous safety system. I feel like they've been given additional weight in the market by the marketing departments of these companies themselves, because again, it's a great way to distinguish yourself from other companies when you're already building a car that is competent and capable in every other way. It's kind of, luxury car companies have been doing this for a long time, adding features that no one really needs, but are different from their direct competitors. And I think that we're starting to see this when it comes to safety technologies, whether it's actually improving outcomes on the road or not seems to be beside the fact when you compare it to their marketability. And I have to believe that most of these technologies fall into the nice to have side of the equation rather than the must have when most people are buying a car. And I'm not sure that someone who's buying an entry level car would be comfortable with paying a significant upcharge to have these types of systems.
Yeah, when we were shopping for a car just a couple of years ago, the only advanced technology we had to have that was a requirement was adaptive cruise control, because it's extremely fatigue killing, right? It's really helpful to keep you much less fatigued on the freeway when you have a car that will adapt to the speed of whatever's going on in front of it. And because of what we do for a living, we drive all kinds of different cars, right? And so all of us know that all of these systems have limits. Just a couple of days ago, I had a vehicle that wouldn't let me back, kept engaging the brake because there was ice on the sensors. And so it assumes there's something back there. So I had to hunt around to find the turn it off stuff to turn off the parking sensors so that I could move the truck. And that's something, a lot of people don't think about, that there are limits to these technologies.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it, and I had a good time. And we're getting into that season around here too, where the weather is really killing the ability of any autonomous system to work. So if our skills erode to the point where we can't recover from an emergency situation when we're notified by one of these systems, or when we're forced, it sucks that these systems do not work in the kind of conditions where we would absolutely love them to work, and that's in the worst possible driving conditions. So we're still a long way from things like vehicle to X communications and hyper accurate mapping that are going to make the future that Aaron was talking about a reality. And until we get there, I think we need to be a lot more careful when we use the word autonomous.
Excellent points. Thank you, Benjamin. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming on. It was really informative. So I guess that's it. That's our show. This has been Aaron.
And this is Kristen.
This is the Drive Mode Show.
Thanks for watching.